Hi guys, I apologize for this really like poor quality video. But I wanted to pre-record my speech, so I am going to talk about something that is a little bit vulnerable at first, and it might be somewhat triggering. So just like if you need to not think about the questions I pose or you just need to turn off volume, like please do that. So I want you to think about a time where maybe you had to leave something or give something up or step away from something, and how that made you feel, how that may have been hard or easy, and maybe the challenge that it posed for your heart. And so I'm going to share two stories. The first one is really personal. When I was 7, my brother had a huge brain surgery. It was his third one, but this one was the big one where it's called a hemispherectomy, and it's where they disconnect half of your brain. And so he had a severe seizure disorder, and he has what's called Sturge-Weber syndrome. And he just wasn't able to live life healthy and with other resources. And so he was kind of in need of this surgery. And so at 7 years old, I was told basically that I needed to say goodbye to him and that I needed to be prepared that he probably would not make it through his surgery due to like the fragile state that he was in. And so as a 7-year-old who, my brother's only 17 months older than me, and we were super close. So despite his developmental delays and some things, like, he was still my brother, and I was kind of too young to really realize he was very different than like most people his age. So we were really close, and so this was a really challenging experience for my life, and really hard. But it also brought out some really beautiful things. So he gave me permission to share this, so don't worry, I've asked him. But this is a picture of him. It's kind of hard to tell, but I was able to actually take this picture right before he had surgery. I think it's like a day or two. I can't quite remember, but before surgery. And then I actually made the frame myself. So the frame, like the wood and the mosaic, I made by myself. And so I made it, and I think it represents like so much of my life in a weird way. Each piece of tile is not the same actually, and you can't see in the video, but a lot of the pieces are cracked and chipped, but yet they still come together to make this beautiful picture. And my brother's also just a reminder, he actually made it. He's okay. He is living super well and thriving. But it's just my reminder that like life changes quickly. Never take for granted kind of the experiences and things that you're given. So that's my first kind of like, I had to be prepared to leave my brother, and I don't know that you ever prepare your heart enough for that. And then a second time, which was super lighthearted, was just in college. I struggled to like discern my vocational direction, and a lot of that was because I knew what God was calling me to do, and I didn't want to obey and didn't want to submit and follow. It was a lot easier just to do what everyone else told me I should do, and do what looked good, and do what my parents thought was the best use of their money. So when I decided to truly pursue what I knew God was calling me to, that came with a lot of leaving of things and some relationships that no longer exist. And so that was just challenging and hard, but worth it. So those are two experiences that I've had to leave. When I've had to leave some things behind, they're not super significant in terms of like leaving like where I grew up or like leaving my childhood home, but I know that that is the story for some people. And so I just challenge you to lean into those feelings and try to apply those as I share the story of a group in the Bible that also had to do this. And so that is where I'm headed next is, well, why does this matter? Well, in Exodus, the Israelites also had to get up and leave. And it is a story that is often overlooked, a small piece of kind of the whole narrative of the exile, and one that I have fallen in love with as I have kind of grown in this season and studied some of this in college. And so I'm just going to share kind of my own reflections over it, and I hope that it is maybe significant or meaningful or brings a different light for you. So I'm actually going to read from Exodus 12, which is right after the 10 plagues when Pharaoh tells the people that they need to leave. And so this is also right after the Passover. So Exodus 31 through 36, just listen for the word of the Lord. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested, and take your flocks and herds as you have said, and go. And also bless me." The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country, for otherwise, they said, we will all die. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added and carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs, wrapped in clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people, and they gave them what they asked for, so they plundered the Egyptians. The word of the Lord. I love this Old Testament passage, like I've already said, but I'm going to share a few of the reasons that I think this passage is significant, and I'm going to do it kind of verse by verse, so bear with me as I do that. It might be helpful for you to open your own Bible, but you do not have to. So, in verse 31, we see Pharaoh tell the people, leave. This is not only significant because of Pharaoh's change in heart towards the people, but it's also significant for Pharaoh's change of heart towards God. And like I mentioned briefly before reading this, there's a few historical pieces from this book that are important. One is that Pharaoh had a very hardened heart towards the people of Israel and towards God. And that is what led to the 10 plagues, was that Pharaoh was unwilling to accept what God was trying to tell him and teach him, and through Aaron and through Moses. And so the 10 plagues fell upon the nation, and it is at this point that Pharaoh says, leave. And he also says, worship the Lord as you have requested. And that is really significant in that he has changed his heart so much so that he could tell the people to worship the Lord as they've requested. We go on to verse 32. He says, take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and go. And that is also important because during this time, livestock and flocks of any kind are significant to the wealth and the health of communities like this. They use them for offerings, they use them for food, they use it for like all sorts of trading purposes. And so that is significant that he is telling them to take what they own, take what they have, and go. Instead of just like leave all your things, he's saying, no, take your things and go. And then the Egyptians in verse 33 have also urged the people to hurry and leave the country. It's like as if they know that Pharaoh might change his mind yet again, because Pharaoh, as we have seen earlier in the book of Exodus, changes his mind a lot. And so the people go. And it says at the end of verse 33 that I think is something to focus on, is they said, go, otherwise we will all die. So they understand that if they do not leave now, like they will die. And so I think that is part of maybe the Israelites' willingness to flee and to leave, is that they know and understand that they're going to die, that they might die. But I also think that it's significant because they still had a willingness to leave and to get up and to go. And then we see in verse 35, the Israelites did as Moses instructed, and asked the Egyptians for articles of gold and silver and for clothing. And not only is that just a sign of God's provision, that like God had prepared not only the Israelites but the Egyptians to provide for the Israelites as they are about to leave, is huge and really, really amazing. And challenges me to think about like, would I be willing to like give what I have, my own possessions, to like people who were fleeing? And so that's something that I was like, wow. And then it ends with, the Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people and gave them what they asked for. And that's just, a beautiful image of how a nation at odds, communities that even don't necessarily agree on everything, can still provide for one another and support one another in the decisions that they need to make. So you're probably wondering, how does this even connect, and why does this even matter in the grand scheme of what I shared? And that's a very valid question. I have a few thoughts. One is that it's important to realize, and something that I don't think I realized right away, is how many people the nation of Israel was. And they believe it's about 2 million people. And so if you think about the idea of 2 million people, like literally getting up at the command of Pharaoh, who they have no idea when Pharaoh or what Pharaoh was going to tell them, and can just leave, and to be prepared enough to just leave takes an act of immense faith, and a heart that is really in trust with God and his provision and your leaders. And it's just something that I missed as I read through this on my own, and the first time. And so I'm grateful for some commentators and historians who have really pointed that out. That also is also a theological point of dispute. There are a lot of commentators who don't agree that there was probably 2 million. Some think there were less, some think there could have been more. Does it really matter? I mean, no, we understand that it was a lot of people, but most would agree that it was approximately 2 million people. The other thing that is really amazing is that despite the fearful hearts that we clearly see that they were fearful, they were still willing to obey a leader who they had to trust that God had placed before them, and to trust that Pharaoh was truly telling them to get up and leave. And that is something that I don't know that I would be able to do if my leaders told me just to get up and to leave. And that as a nation, they were ready, and they were united, and they were willing to go. So as I wrap up, I want you to just think about in your own life, why does this matter? But my question to you is, would you be ready? Would you be willing? Is your heart able to get up and to leave? To leave all that you have, to leave all that you know, to leave anything in order to pursue what God has called you to do, or to pursue or to obey where God has asked you to go. And so my last piece, and I hope the connection makes sense for you guys as it does for my own brain, is actually a poem by Mother Teresa, and it's called Anyway. And it's written to people to think about themselves, but it helps me orient myself to thinking about my heart towards people and my heart towards God and the things that maybe he's calling me to do. So it also helps me kind of maybe see where these things in Pharaoh and how Pharaoh maybe had felt. So bear with me as I read through it. And I actually have a painting of it. I did this last year during a really challenging time. So yeah, it reads, "People are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish motives. Be kind anyway. And if you are honest, people may cheat you. Be honest anyway. If you find happiness, people may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give your best anyway. For you see, in the end, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway." By Mother Teresa. Thanks for listening, and I hope that maybe this challenges you to think about your own heart towards the things God's calling you to do and maybe where he's calling you to go.